All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Best Self Blueprint. So, as you all know, the mission of this podcast is to bring on people with the knowledge, insights, and experiences as to what it takes to move that dial towards becoming the best version of yourself. So, this next guest story begins in a situation many of us have been before with no sense of direction. After completing high school and getting into college, he just knew that wasn't his path. However, the rest of his story is a situation not many of us can even imagine. And it's this story of kung fu teaching, MMA fighting, stunt working, entrepreneurship, and personal development that I can't wait to hear more about. So, all the way from Australia, meet Balint Jozsa. What's up, man? How you doing?
Beautiful.
I said it right?
I'm really good. Oh, dude, that was like one of the best ways to English people have said my name so far. So well done. Well
All
done.
right. I made it on the leaderboard. So I want to start by having you share this story. So when I was doing the research, this is one of my favorite things that I came across. The story of you teaching a kung fu class, and you talked about how, like, because you were the teacher, you kind of had yourself up on a pedestal until you tripped and sprained your ankle in front of the class. And you talk
Oh,
about
dude.
the kind of the experience that you learned about humility. So if you could just dive into that.
Oh man, that was kind of an embarrassing moment, wasn't it? Okay, so I it's funny that especially when I was an instructor, I literally became an instructor just before my 18th birthday. So I was still 17. And I taught until I was about 21, 22. So throughout that 4 years, again, you're pretty young again, you are becoming a man, like you are trying to earn your place in the world. So this was one for me. Kung fu, especially the fact that I was an instructor, was a very big part of my identity, and helped me kind of keep my head above the water. Is like, this is my worth and value, and I really have pride and joy in my craft. And there was this one time, we actually teaching sparring, right? So it wasn't like proper contact sparring, it was just point sparring. And I was only like 2 or 3 people in there. And I decided, you know what, I'll jump in as well. I'll be there and involved, because I had some other instructors do that too. And I come in and I feel pretty good. Some of the guys are hiding behind, pretending to be scared of me and whatnot. We are doing that's the dumbest thing. So we are warming up, right? So we are running in a circle and say, okay, going backwards. Let's go backwards. And as I started going backwards, I misplaced my foot and just went clink. And I was like, and trying to hold myself together. I'm in pain, bro. And I'm trying to hold back the tear that's coming out of my eye and everything. So I went from here down to here, and then afterwards, I'm like, I did the class, but afterwards, I'm like, nah, I'm done. I had to cancel the rest of my students. I'm like, I need to rest because this is dumb. So it was a really great story about humility. That the fact that when we put ourselves up and over exaggerate our abilities, and if we don't humble ourselves, life will humble ourselves, either by circumstance or the people that we attract. And in this case, it was a circumstance that I brought in by an injury. And later on, especially as I was learning about the mind, the body, about personal development, I learned a lot that oftentimes when it comes to illnesses and injuries, sometimes they are linked to the mental blockages that we have within our system. So each part of our body has been linked to different parts that we struggle with. Now, especially that part of my life, even though I was really good at Kung Fu and specifically teaching, I had this hit that I kind of was stuck and wasn't moving forward in my life. I was doing really well, but I was still going in a circle, not just in that. That was a time when I quit college and university. So again, I just felt like I was doing things, but I was still going in a circle. And oftentimes the legs, and specifically the ankles, are spiritually more linked to the fact that not being able to move forwards. So I had quite a few ankle injuries while I was at Kung Fu. And my belief is that was just a physical representation of what's happening in my consciousness of not being able to move forwards in my life.
Yeah, so I also believe in stuff like that. I think injuries. I've fortunately and unfortunately gotten injured quite a few times in the past year by my own doing. It's not anything too crazy, but it's one of those things where it tends to come at a time where life is telling you you need to rest, you need to take a second, there's something you're missing. So I absolutely love that. And one thing I want to go back to, because this is actually another thing that I have written down, you've talked about when you're feeling up, you want to go down, and when you're feeling down, you want to go up. In terms of like when you're up, you should be teaching others, and when you're down, you should be seeking counsel. If you could talk about that and kind of like how you learned about that and how you implement it.
Sure. So that kind of philosophy has kind of showed up in many parts of my life. So for like the way I started into personal development is I actually won a scholarship to a guy. It's a one-day workshop called Dr. John DeMartini, and a lot of the stuff and information I come is actually coming from his teaching and his methodology. He was one of the people that was part of The Secret, and he is a weapon of a human being. I think he studied like 200 different ologies, read like 30 to 40,000 texts, authored like 100 books. So he's like a weapon of like a polymath. He's incredible. So if you try to get like the best analogy I can give about him is that is if you want to take a sip of inspiration from him, it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant. It's like just full of information coming out at you. Like there was many times I go to his like seminars or day courses or speeches, even listening to like one of his podcasts, and I like had to sit back and I'm like, my brain's fried. Like my whole reality has been busted open. I can't do this anymore. So anyway, so his teaching goes back to the fact of like balance, but more importantly is being elated and deflated. And oftentimes it's very animalistic. So we try to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So if we are pumping ourselves up more than we should, then we are going to get humbled. If we are deflating ourselves more than we should, we are going to get supported. A very easy example, probably most of us can experience, like relate to this in some form or fashion, is that like we, let's say we have a great day at work, and we really feel great about it and everything. Maybe we feel, okay, maybe I need to get on the circuit here or whatnot. Maybe and you know, you start to play scenarios, you get home and you get slammed by someone at home, like either the spouse, either by a parent, either by a sibling, or the dog crapped itself on the carpet. Like something happens to humble you and bring you down to balance. And oftentimes like, oh, then the spouse is toxic, then the house environment toxic. No, dickhead, you are being too overinflated. And then brings you that. By the way, I might curse. I don't know.
It's totally fine. Totally fine.
Okay, cool. Especially like I'm in Australia, so like different levels of language comes through. So that's the humility in that one as well. Now, also, I've been involved around the network marketing industry for a while as well. And they have a saying that's very, very similar. Again, comes back to the parallels I was talking about, is that when you're up, talk to your downline and pour that love into them. And when you're down, talk to your upline to actually get inspiration and lift up from them. So again, it's the same methodology and just in a different form of life. So I became very much aware of this like quite early on. But again, like when you learn a lesson, you don't just learn it and move on. Sometimes you learn a lesson and it's layers, and you learn the layers of it as you go through life. So I learned another version of this more recently, is that being involved with again, I was talking to a girl, and romantically, like is really nice and everything. And was getting very much elated. But again, my highest values has been personal development, especially in my physical training and whatnot. And I went on a fantasy with like about her. And then when you go on fantasy, you attract a nightmare, and actually made the rest of my other parts of my life much more harder. So I'm not sure if you can see it here on the video, but I got a scar here on my temple. Is that during that time of like, okay, I'm not sure what's happening with this girl, so the emotional volatility, like a few weeks after that, I get kneed in the head in Jiu-Jitsu. It's like I needed 6 stitches. And then a week after that, literally the day I was getting my stitches out, I get hit by a car. My car gets rammed in by a what we call a ute, what you guys call a pickup truck. Again, he had a bull bar, so a full metal thing in front of it, so he had not even a scratch. My little Hyundai Gats got squashed. So I heard the saying is that when you need to do something, first God tickles you with a feather, then throws a brick at your head, but don't wait for the truck. Now, I waited for all three on this in these cases. So I learned my lesson to make sure that, again, if you go on a fantasy, you're going to attract a nightmare. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to, again, going through a relationship, but just being aware that if you put a fantasy around the person, no human being can actually fulfill that fantasy anyway. Therefore, life will humble you if you do not humble yourself. So we went on a tangent here and there, but I hope I bring that together.
No, yeah, I think that was awesome, man. That was like when you talk about when you like try to get a sip and you get hit with the fire hydrant. I think that's how you just started this, which I'm so happy you did, because I love coming out of the gates strong with a lot of good conversation, good content for people. One thing I'm curious about, so when you talk about if you're starting to fantasize, it'll create a nightmare. Now, what my takeaway from that is, like, you need to take things as they are and not try to like play them up, whether it's too good or too bad. You just need to like take things in stride, understand the reality of the situation. Is that kind of how you interpret that, or how you perceive things now with that in mind?
It absolutely can be. At the end of the day, nothing ever is good or bad. And our moral judgment is added by us. The universe is just is. Okay. And so, yes, that definitely happens. But again, when we're human beings, we're emotional creatures, especially we've got a brain that's thousands of years of old and hasn't necessarily evolved as fast as we have. So we still have this kind of primitive kind of going, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, especially when it comes to our lowest values. So our highest values, we are like those things we endure pleasure and pain for. But the things that are low on our values, we want more pleasure and we don't want pain. So it's more specifically for overall seeing everything. It goes back to the whole saying that I learned this from Nlp Neuro-Linguistic Programming, for people don't know. So Tony Robbins started with a neuro-linguistic programming. A lot of the stuff that he implements is NLP. They told that's where the first time I learned this is that roughly, again, the numbers change depending on the person you talk to, the concept stays the same. So there's about roughly around 2 million bits of information hitting our senses every single second, but we're only able to take in 134 bits. So that's zero. So our reality is only 0.01%, less than that, less than 0.01% of actual reality. So when we face with a situation, and again, like if you're in personal development, you might have your goals and whatnot. It's very good to have this kind of mindset that if you're going to see something that supports your goal, you're going to think that's good. If you see something that challenges your goal, you might see it as bad. And so it's more important, what I've been learning, especially through Dr. John Demartini material, is that you need to have good questions. Is that if the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of the questions you ask. So if you are in a situation where you are learning something or going towards something and you have a situation where you think it's all good, you are exaggerating the upside and minimizing the downside. If you are seeing something that's bad, or a person that's bad, you are, again, exaggerating the downside and minimizing the upside. So we can take COVID, for example, and let's say you are going towards your goals, and I'll just simplistically say I'll use mine. So I knew for a fact that, okay, I wanted to, for me, training is important, and I like to do that. And then COVID hit, I wasn't able to train. Okay, cool. So what was I able to do? That could, if I stayed in that consciousness, like, this is upsetting, I don't want to do it, that just kind of ruined my day. It's not going to help me be productive. Okay, so where is the benefit of this? Well, I picked up running. Ever since COVID hit, I'm actually not afraid of running anymore. I hated running, especially I told you guys I twisted my ankles before, so that was a limiting belief there. Because of COVID, I was able to actually challenge that and actually go towards that. That was great. Because of COVID, I got into stunts properly. Because of COVID, the place that I knew and they kind of knew me, had a cancellation for a 2-week course, and they asked me if I wanted to jump in. And in that situation, because again, there was a few things, it just lined, but I was able to make it happen. And now I'm training up to be a proper stunt person, because why not? It excites me. So it's like, okay, you have a situation, and if you feel whatever way you feel, it's a good way to actually ask, okay, how is that a benefit? If it's a drawback, for example, in COVID. But you can also ask, if you see something that's just great, okay, what is the drawback of that? You're you're humbling yourselves instead of life humbling you. It's the most efficient way of doing it. It takes a little bit of work, and sometimes we don't want to give up our fantasy because it feels so damn good. But if you have the humility and say, okay, cool, what is actually the drawback of this? Like, what does it actually take? And a drawback doesn't necessarily mean it has to be bad. Like, for example, I did this with my stunt training. Okay. So I don't want to be blindsided or potentially be preyed upon by the industry, because if you think about it, the film industry is big, and we all heard stories about someone getting screwed over left, right, and center. So, okay, that's a drawback that I need to be aware of. There are some big long sharks and wolves out there that will take you blindsided if you let them. The other thing as well, again, like, yes, there's a risk of injury, but more importantly, you can also ask not what's the drawback, what's the cost of this? So the cost of, for me, for example, I train twice a day throughout the week. Again, like, I happily do it. It's my highest value, but that's still something I'm investing myself. So what it does, it's not just it makes it this magical thing. I actually value my input into it. I value my craft. And when you value a craft, you are willing to actually ask for your worth. You ask for your money, ask for like because you see what it took for you to actually get there. Oftentimes you say, oh yeah, but I'm good. That's why I hate the word talent, because no, you talent, you might have had it seed, but you need to develop that talent. You need to develop and grow that. So because of that, you need to work and actually value that. If you don't see what you need to do to cultivate that, yeah, you might have been more talented out of all the kids that started, whatever that might have been, but you cultivated that. You put in hours of practice. You put in your life's work. You sacrificed, didn't do parties. You actually said no to things. You might have given up relationships. You need to value what you invested on, what you said no to, and what the cost of that for you able to actually have that craft. When you do that, you value yourself more, you're able to ask for more, and you're able to actually take yourself to more. But again, that comes from that centeredness of saying, that's it. It's great. It inspires me. So it goes from this whim of a fantasy to an inspiration. So we experience many different emotions, and centeredness, gratefulness, inspiration. There's only a handful of them where you actually feel centered. Is that awakened state, that present state. Now, we're never there all the time. Anyone that says that, they're always there, run away, because they are lying. You experience glimpses of the universal greatness, but you do not stay there. Once you like solve a puzzle in life, you hit a new level, new devils. Once you hit that new level, then you go through these emotional up and downs because you're learning a new greater lesson. And then when you learn that, guess what? You're going up to the next level. Why? Because life is about growth. Either you're green, you're growing, or you're ripe and you rot. So there you go. Another fire hydrant there.
Yeah, man. So there's two of the biggest things I want to touch on. The first one is I think it's such a snowball effect of when you talked about, like, the more value you put on yourself or on this task or this goal, the more driven you're going to be to do it, the better you're going to get. And then the better you get, the more value you're going to put on it because of the time, the effort, the energy you've already invested in it. And that's where I think it ties into the second thing I'm going to talk about, which is, you mentioned talent. And this is something I am obsessed with, where I agree. I think, yes, there are people who naturally do have like things that they're better at than other people, if you just take it at that base level. But in life, there isn't just that base level. There's time and effort. And that's where the game completely changes. For example, I have two great friends who are brothers, and they won't mind me saying this because they acknowledge this. Both of them do, where one of them is extremely intelligent, very naturally smart, gifted individual. And the other one is just a workhorse. He is very driven. He is very goal oriented. He is always striving for growth. And they'll both acknowledge the less naturally talented one is doing way better, at least right now, because of the fact that he puts insane amount of hours into his work, into his health, into his relationships, into his life in general. And that's where people need to understand, like, you can't rely on the fact that someone tells you you're naturally just charismatic or you're naturally good at this or that. because eventually there's going to be someone who's working their tail off that passes you up. And then they've already got that momentum because they've invested that time and effort. They have that value attached to it, and they're already off to the races. Meanwhile, you're completely stagnant at the start line.
Exactly. You're taking ownership for your own abilities. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact name of the study and the reference to it, but again, it's a really cool concept. They did this quick study with little kids, and they took two groups and they actually asked them to do a very easy task. Group A said, "Oh, you're really good at this." And then the second group that did a very easy task, and they said, "Oh, you worked very hard on this." That's it. That was the difference. You're good at this, or you worked really hard on this. And then they gave them an impossible task that they couldn't solve. Now, not only that the people that were told that they were praised on their work ethic, not only did they try more, and actually some of them didn't really even give up, but the kids that were praised upon their abilities, they actually said, like, turned around and then later on started to lie about it because they were trying to protect that identity that this big professor or teacher gave to them. So it's a crazy thing, is like one was praised for their work ethic, one was praised for their ability, and the people that were praised for their work ethic, they actually stayed harder on a task that was impossible to solve. But not only that, they actually hold on to their integrity longer.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know the name of the study either, but I know what you're talking about. It's in a book written by an author named Carol Dweck called Mindset. Amazing book about growth versus fixed mindset, the benefits of a growth mindset. She gives more case studies and references than I even know how to handle, which is awesome. But another thing I want to go back to a little bit is you mentioned the words extreme ownership, and let's see, where is it in the notes? So I like what you said about choosing extreme ownership, especially there was a quote that I found that you said, "If I give away the power, the control is no longer in my hands." Meaning, if something even goes wrong in your life, and a lot of people will argue it's out of your control or it's not your fault, you being willing to take extreme ownership even over those situations puts the ball back in your court. It gives you the power to control the narrative in the situation. If you could talk about that a little bit and your perspective on that, I think it'll be really helpful for people.
Oh, for sure. I think one of the best people to look up if you actually deeply want to dive into this is Jocko Willink. Like he's again an ex-Navy SEAL. He's a weapon of a human being. Runs a really cool podcast, very much on the, I guess, more targeted to the male audience. But like a lot of the information he talks about is great for business, great for going towards big goals. Like he's a really interesting person to follow. But extreme ownership, like, okay, let me put it in simple ways. If someone done you wrong, and again, if you alive, that's going to happen, whether it's a family member, a friend, maybe someone outside of you, maybe a work colleague or whatever. And if you point a finger at them, remember, if you're pointing a finger, you got four other fingers pointing back at you. So you are, if you give away your power, you give away your solutions. Like then you have no situation if you don't step up as a leader. Now the problem is most people want things to be sold for them. They want the answers to be handed to them. And again, we all get to live our lives how we want to. But if you want to live like the bigger goals and bigger dreams that you go towards, you don't have to. Like, again, like I had a friend, I remember she told the story, she went to south of France, and all they done is they woke up at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock, went to work at 10, came home at like 3 p.m., sat with their family, had cheese and wine, and then repeated the next day. It's a beautiful life, but man, that would be boring for me. That was for her as well. So it's like, again, we all get to live our life. You don't have to live these crazy big goals, and it's not about who has the bigger goal. It's not a dick measuring contest, for God's sake. It's more about like what inspires you. And if you got a big goal that inspires you, you can go for it. But you have to understand that there's going to be people and challenges and situations come towards you that's going to hold you back or challenge you or help you learn a skill or get a contact or something to actually be able to go through that. Again, and the more we can learn that nothing is ever like in the way, it's actually helping us on the way. And this is where the question comes up, like, how's this a benefit? How is this a drawback? Like those two questions can change your life forever if you practice them and really, really look for it, because they're always there. They're always there. But the more you can actually see that, the more you can actually be in line and actually find solutions wherever you go. So again, because it's not what happens to us, it's what we do with what happens. So again, it goes back to this extreme ownership, is that if you simplify life, if you super simplify life, let's say life is a poker game. Now, I don't personally play poker, but I know poker enough to say that no matter what hand you get, you can either win or lose, because it's not about what cards you get. You can get a royal flush and be annihilated. It's not about what you get, it's how you play with what you get. So you might have ended up like, you might have had like a tougher start in life. Well, great. Like Steve Jobs didn't have parents either. Isaac Newton didn't have parents. Like those are tough lives, yet one had great minds and did great things about it. Oftentimes people have challenges early on, and people that actually take their challenges fuel, because again, our values are fueled by what we feel is missing. And then when we actually feel that, oftentimes the greatest strategies could actually be the greatest gifts within our lives, and actually greatest awakenings in our lives. And if we don't take ownership of it, again, we leave a lot of money on the table, of options on the table, but more importantly, we can't be the solution. We can't bring solutions to it. So Mark Victor Frankl, always forget his last name, the Jewish psychiatrist that was in the Nazi concentration camps. He wrote a book about his experience in there, and he was one of the few people who actually survived it. Not because he was any better, not because he was any fitter, where they all went through extreme physical tormentation for sure, but because his focus was that no matter what, they can never take my mental strength unless I let them. Because he took that ownership, he was able to actually go mind over body and actually survive that experience. It's not what happens to us, it's what we actually bring able to bring out from a situation, no matter what. So extreme ownership is that it's tough at the beginning, because if you've never done it before, again, we just go through our lives every day, and only when tragedy hits, that's when we only become creative. But if we take extreme ownership, that no, this is okay, cool. This, even though this happened to me, it wasn't fair and whatnot. Well, okay, happened. Like it is what it is now. And as this joke is like, you can either go to therapy or say, is what it is. But in this case, it's more, it is what it is for the moment. What can I do with that? So if you get hold up on the story that she wronged me, or this person, he has challenged me and failed me. And if we just run those stories again, whatever we tell ourselves is going to become stronger. So if we just neutralize, okay, that's what happened. What can we do with this? And start as a board to go, okay, this is a situation. We work with that. It becomes much easier. Like, I guess the easiest methodology, like the easiest analogy I can give about is Jiu-Jitsu. So in Jiu-Jitsu, you're rolling and you're trying to cause enough pain or suffocate the other person so they tap. That's pretty much the game. So what you do, like there was many times I would try to do a sweep or try to do something and it would not work. Or I end up in a worse situation. If I get caught up and saying, oh, damn it, I should have done this, I'm going to get killed. I'm going to get crushed. So it happens, it might be annoying. Cool, I ended up in a different position. Now what can I do with this? So it's you roll with life. You literally roll with the punches of life. So extreme ownership gives you that opportunity to say, okay, cool, whatever happened. It might have been unfair. It might have been not your fault. But if you want control of your life, if you want the things in your life, you have to be responsible for that. Because no one's getting up in the morning and saying, oh, okay, I'm going to make sure that Trevor is going to get the best quality of life ever possible. No one does that except you for your own life. So if you don't take ownership, no one will. If you don't value yourself, no one will. If you don't love yourself, it's going to be hard for others to love you too.
Yeah, I mean, holy cow, there's so much to talk about with that. All right, so one thing I want to touch on for people who haven't yet practiced the concept of extreme ownership and they see the utility of it, which you should because it just makes sense to do, but it doesn't quite resonate with you yet. just think about fault versus responsibility. It may not be your fault that something happened. It may not be your fault that a truck hit you. It may not be your fault that you got a flat tire, which that might be your fault. I don't know. But even if it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility to make sure that you don't get stuck in that situation longer than you need to be in that situation. It's your responsibility to yourself and to the people that are looking up to you or the people that are seeking your counsel. It's your responsibility to make sure that you get out of whatever problem you're in. And so I think that's really, really powerful. And really, at like when you practice that fault versus responsibility to the extreme, that's when you get to extreme ownership. It's where you understand it doesn't matter who's at fault. Your responsibility is to make sure that you're not dwelling on it. So,
Let me add one more thing to this. This doesn't have to be something that your life changes right now and completely revamp your life, because your subconscious is going to freak the fuck out and you're just going to go back to what you normally did. So again, extreme ownership could just mean you don't feel organized, make your fucking bed. Every morning, just commit to making your bed before you leave the room, leave the house, whatever. Because like something like it's a habit, like anything else. It's like how you think is a habit. What you do every morning is a habit. How you deal with a situation is a habit. Because whatever happens, it might trigger you. Like, I love what Tony Robbins says, is that when he, like, it's on YouTube, if you guys really look up his story when 9/11 happened. He was in Hawaii, and he always tells this story. And when I went to Unleash the Power Within with him, he told it there, but I heard him say it many, many times before, is that there was every single reaction to it. And there was people that were angry, people that were sad, people that were upset, people that were confused, people that were lost, people wanted to do every single reaction happened. But the funny thing that he really pointed out is that angry people just got angrier, sad people just got sadder. So we have a natural response how we respond to things. Again, it goes back to habits. So again, if you want to change how you respond to life, you don't have to jump the boat and completely change it. Like some people, it works, but it's going to be a rougher sell because you're reprogramming yourself, and that's fine. And you can do that. And if you have enough motivation, you will go through the pains. But as I said, like, it can be as small as making your bed. Like, how can you take extreme ownership? Well, you choose how much you're going to eat today. So maybe you don't change what you eat what you normally did, but maybe say, okay, at lunchtime, I'm just going to eat 3/4 what I usually eat. It's not as big for the subconscious, and it's not going to be a big freak out. It's like, oh, just eating a little bit less at one meal. You're taking step by step. It doesn't have to be a massive change. It can be, but just understand that it's going to be a rocky. And if you don't have enough motivation driving you, it's easier to fall off the horse.
yeah, so that's such a good point too. And I want to dive in more to the fact that the bigger the change, the longer you should give yourself grace in making that change. So I always put it in perspective of everybody loves pulling weeds in their garden, right? So in terms of weeding, imagine the size of the habit change is the size of the weed. So if you have a weed about 1.5 inches tall, you can just pluck it out with your hand, no big deal, throw it in the bin, whatever, and it's done. Just like a really small habit is fairly easy to change, like drink one more glass of water a day. Easy, done. But when you're changing a really big habit of going from playing the victim to taking extreme ownership, that's like trying to pull out a sequoia tree. Like there's not just going to be some quick little pluck. You're going to need tools. You're going to need maybe other people. You're going to need time, consistency. And so that's really important. I'm really glad you brought that up. Is none of us are going to suggest that when you're trying to make big changes or trying to achieve big things, you're just going to all of a sudden do it. It's going to take time. It's going to take learning. It's going to take a lot of very uncomfortable situations internally or externally. But that's where I love how you bring in the motivational piece of, and motivation can be taken a lot of different ways. Some people think about it like, oh, you get amped up for 10 minutes and then it withers away. but I'm talking motivation in the lasting sense of like when you wake up and you're motivated to go do a certain thing, that's lasting. And so that's something that you need to really think about. Like, what is your why behind these changes? So since we're kind of going through extreme ownership, if you're someone who, and again, I'm not saying that you're a horrible person or anything like that, but if you're the type of person who you get caught complaining a lot or judging a lot or playing the victim a lot, and you all of a sudden this spotlight is shined on that and you want to make the change, you need to tether that to a really strong why. I say that probably every single episode of the podcast because it's that important. If you're tying it to like, oh, well, I want to change so, people aren't as annoyed with me, that's maybe not going to be a powerful enough why. But if you want to take extreme ownership because your kids are looking up to you and you want to set a good example for your kids, that's a pretty freaking strong why. So making sure that you're really tying these pursuits to the right motivation.
For sure. And remember, motivation, I've been kind of called, oh, you're such a motivator and whatnot. I'm like, I'm not. Like, I like to inspire people, but the problem with motivation, like Zig Ziglar says, is that we recommend it every day because it wears off. Inspiration comes within. Motivation is from external. Now, nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you just have to understand this. Like, as soon as either the stick that's driving you forward or the carrot disappears when it comes to motivation, then you're not going to do the thing. So, like, let's say, yeah, you want to do something better for your kids. And again, if you're young kids, it's great. But let's say, just hypothetical, your kids grow up and you leave, then you might not have the motivation anymore to actually do that thing. So there's nothing wrong with it. Just understand there might be some technicalities that might actually take you off track. And you're like, what's wrong with me? Well, nothing's wrong with you. Just what motivated you in the past doesn't motivate you anymore. So just if you're aware of that, then you can dance with that. That's probably the key word. Is you want to dance with these situations. Again, like there's certain things that I'm more motivated to do. Again, like I had to motivate myself to go swimming a couple of times this week. I promised myself, and I know myself enough to say, if I put it publicly that I'm doing this and I'm going for a bronze medallion, which is just a swim test here in Australia. If I put that publicly and I put that in my schedule and I have coaches and mentors helping me with that, I'll do it. Even if I don't feel like it, I know myself. If those 3 criteria are met, I'll do it. And so that's why I do a post about it on my stories. It's the smallest thing, but it works for me. It might not work for you, but I'm just saying that's my personal example. As that's called hinging points. I never heard anyone else talk about this except Peter Shaw, which is a guy that I learned NLP here from Australia. So hinging points, imagine like hinges on a door. So that's what helps you make the door open. Or you might just be a person that you do things, and if you sleep 8 hours a day, eat every 3 hours, and maybe exercise 4 times a week, everything just happens in your life, and that's wonderful. I'm not that person. It's like I need need a little bit more of a drive here and there. It's like my unique little code. It's like this tick, this tick, this tick. Great. You might need that. You need to do it in a funky way, and then you'll do it. You might need to show off, and then you'll do it. The first time I ever went down into splits is when I was trying to show off to a group of people. Again, it's not necessarily humility, but it got the job done. So, so yes, motivation is definitely a good one, and you want to have that drive to it as well. But you need to make sure that like what you want to do, is either the motivation is definitely strong enough and helping you to do it. Well, another thing you can do, and there's a book about it called Tiny Habits. I think it's Dr. BJ Fogg is, I believe, the author's name. And it talks about the fact that either you increase your motivation or you decrease the ability for you to do it. So meaning that if you, let's say, want to drink more water and you do not have a water bottle with you in the room all the time, your ability to drink water, actually the difficulty increases. I know it sounds dumb because you just have to go out to the kitchen and fill it up, but there's still 2 extra steps. But if you just say, hey, at this time, I fill my bottle up and it's always with me, they're like, oh, drink, done. The ability there has decreased. Exactly. So you either want to, so it's smart if you want to do something new, especially if it's not high enough on your values, then you would definitely want to decrease the ability, make it easier. Now, the flip side, if you have a habit and you don't want to do it, you need to increase the difficulty to get there. For example, you don't want to eat more chocolate, don't buy the fucking chocolate, for one. But the second thing would be you can get someone to hide the chocolate from you if you don't want to completely dislike. And then it's too much of a work to go through all the cabinets, all the fridge to find a piece of chocolate that was hidden. So then the ability is increased to do that too. So for sure, that's why it's very important to find understand, okay, this is my highest values, and you want to do it. Like I see this all the time, specifically, I'm going to use women as an example, mothers specifically, is that there's a lot of people out there that all they would love to do if they could choose just to be a mother and wife. And it's a beautiful goal. There's nothing wrong with it. But there's the societal pressure that like you need to be a business owner, you need to do this, you need to be a super mom, you need to do blah, 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 blah. You don't necessarily have to. But if you understand like that's what you want to do, it's all right, and not only all right, it's actually worthwhile that that's what you're dedicated to, and everything else needs to be linked to that. So Rose Kennedy had a beautiful saying that her mission statement was to bring up the future leaders of the world. And she did. JFK and all the Kennedy family was because she had that mission within her. It's a beautiful statement and nothing wrong with that. And no matter what it is, again, video games get a bad rep, but again, if you love video games, and that's really what like most important to you, and a lot of young boys specifically, that's what they like to do, great. Then you have to understand everything has to be either linked to that, or if you want to do other things, the ability has to be much easier to get there. Like, or you need to goal stack them. Like maybe before you start video games, you have to do 5 push-ups if you want to get fitter. Again, like that's about the creativity, and goes back to the extreme ownership as well. Is that okay? It's not that it's like I'm too tired to go to the gym. Well, there's millions of home exercises you can look up on YouTube, and some of them are just 5, 10, 20 minutes long. Some are 30. So you can maybe just watch that video before you do everything else, do your workout, and then you're fine. It might work, might not work. It doesn't matter. It's more that creative process to actually do that. So anyway, so when it comes to like you want to do a new habit, it might be something big you need to change, and it might not be necessary. You might not have it might be a big motivation, but the motivation might not be big enough to take out that tree. Like, let's say your motivation is like a ram with big horns. That thing is headbutting the tree all day long. The tree's not going to go. You need to cut the tree away first, and then the ram can even just sneeze on it and the tree will fall. So it's understanding, okay, the size of your motivation and the size of the ability that what you're trying to do. And if you have a task and you not break it down, the ability of it is huge. But if, let's say, for example, you want to be healthier, okay, small habits. If you buy smaller plates to eat from, you will eat less psychologically. Even if you eat 2 plates of food, because you have 2 small plates, you eat smaller. It's like small little tweaks. You're chopping away that tree finely. Now, if your motivation is an elephant, you can take any fucking tree out, whatever you want. But you see, you need to either increase your motivation, increase your why, increase your drive, or increase the ability or decrease the ability to do it, or reverse it if you want to actually not do a habit. If you want to take away a habit.
Yeah, man. So I want to, and I'll be respectful of your time. I mean, I'd be more than happy to do this again, because I feel like the more you talk, the more questions I want to keep asking, because this is stuff, seriously, this is content I've been waiting to get out to people since I started this podcast. Some of the things you're saying is stuff that everyone needs to hear. Now, my final point, so I do a final 2, but before that, we'll go through a couple other things.
Oh, we can do a final 2, man.
So sweet. But my last thing real quick, and I love that you mentioned this, is you can have as much motivation as humanly possible, and sometimes that won't be enough. That's why you need the tools, the people. So like the coaches or mentors, the supportive friends, the techniques or strategies. Like sometimes willpower and motivation isn't going to do that. I'm sorry if someone disagrees. I'm more than happy to have that debate. But there are some things where you do need tools and people and other external things to make it happen, or stop making it happen if it's something you want to take away. So there's that. All right. Before I get into the final two, where can people connect with you if they want to learn about doing stunt work, or if they want to learn more about mixed martial arts, or if they're just interested in any of the things we talked about? Where can people connect with you?
So Instagram is probably a good one. So it's Balint_Jozsa. That's an easy way to do. Facebook as well, Balint Jozsa. So it should come up with the same picture. I think Instagram might be the easiest way to find me. But yeah, follow me craziness I get up to. I may recently be more active with my stories. I will do more stuff as my training comes up and keeps going. But Facebook is so far as where I've been doing these kind of conversations with my lives and kind of sharing, but I am kind of readjusting things how I do it. So yes, you can connect me there, and also don't be afraid to send me a message. I love to actually, if you have any other questions or you're not 100% sure on something, just reach out, DM me, and I'm happy to have that conversation. It's good to connect with people, especially if you got value out of this. If you just got value out of this, I love to hear that too. It's one of those things where like, oh my God, like what I said actually made a difference. So like at the beginning, I remember on this journey, it's like, I wish one day that maybe like you could do it. And I know a lot of people out there, like maybe learn about this content for the first time. You might have this vision that one day you want to do that, because that's what I had. Like the first time I went to see John DiMartino when I was 16, I was sitting there completely fried. I'm holding my bladder because I needed to go to the bathroom for the last 3 hours. But I'm so in tune with what I'm learning that I'm like, I can't leave this for a second. And in that moment, I'm like, one day I want to do this. And the last 2 years, I had more and more of this opportunity. So again, if you got value out of it, honestly, it would mean the world to me to actually hear it too.
Man, you and me both. I had I don't get those messages all the time, but I've gotten a few, and that is the coolest feeling in the world when just a simple conversation between two people impacts a third party. So anyone listening, whether it's me or him, message us both,
Yeah.
preferably, if you got something out of this. Now, before I do
Tag
the
us in
whole
an
wrap
Instagram
up,
story or whatnot.
yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So getting into the final two, this is two questions I wrap up the show with for every single guest I have on. Question one, what for you right now is the next step in becoming your best self?
Oh, it's be a great stunt performer. So in Australia, you need to be graded. In America, you just need connections. I know in the UK has the toughest stunt grading you can ever do. And Europe is a bit different. But in Australia, you need to be graded. And for me, that's the next thing. So with that, again, it's my training, but also then growing my social retail business. With that, again, one of the things I do is that help people either get that in best shape of their life with nutrition, and also like a supplement program we have. So it's the main thing is to actually be graded, but also have opportunity for my customers to actually get the best possible nutrition as they can. So that will be my next step.
All right. I am so excited. As soon as you're done with this training, like any stunt work videos you have, I want to see them, because the few that I saw of you doing like the backflip into like the superhero landing and stuff, that
Yeah.
stuff's so cool. So definitely share that stuff with me. Now, the last question is less of a question for, you to answer to me, but more for you to talk to the audience. So if you could challenge the listeners to do one thing, this could be something that will teach them about themselves, something that will better their life in some way. You have the floor to challenge the audience to do one thing. What would your challenge be?
Okay. So we're coming nice and close and intimate with this one. And one of the big things I learned from my journey, because again, as Trevor told, is I quit university. I was actually studying zoology because I thought I'm going to be the next Steve Irwin. Like that's the path I wanted to go down. I wanted to do documentaries. So it's funny how the concept of doing something exciting, physically challenging, and then sharing the journey along the way has always stayed with me. But now I'm doing, the form has changed. Instead of animals, I'm I'm doing stunts or martial arts. So the form has changed, but the essence stayed the same. So, but during that transition, you're going to hit some moments, and like this is the midlife crisis, is that, or the quarter life crisis, or whatever, is that when you actually don't know who you are anymore. That's because you are going through a value shift, and that's okay. Now, as for me, most likely the essence of what you were doing stayed the same, but the form, you find a more efficient way of doing it. Maybe the form that you were doing was not that. So anyway, when I was 21, I went to the seminar. Again, John DeMartini, I had his book. So because I had this book, I was able to actually get a couple of minutes with him, just talk to him. And I was like, hey, John, can you sign this book for me? And then he was very happy to sign it and whatnot. And I asked him, hey, listen, what would your suggestion be if you're lost, you're not 100% sure what you're doing, you want to do, and you're just kind of in this abyss of limbo, and you don't know where to go? And he probably in that second probably gave one of the best advices I ever got as a young man, is that not a problem. He took my pen, he took my notepad, and wrote down this: start with what you know and let what you know grow. Start with what you know and let what you know grow was such an important lesson for me, because especially we are brought up with this whole factor that, what do you want to be when you finish high school? Fuck, I'm 17. I don't even know who I am. And you want to choose who I want to be for the rest of my fucking life? Insanity. And this is the craziest thing. This is the fucking craziest thing, is that most people are asking, have no clue what they want in life. Most adults are going through guessing life. And we are taking advice from people who have no clue what they're doing to ask them what we want to do when we don't even know who ourselves are. It's insanity. But again, it's the paradigm we have been involved with. And because look up to your parents, be a good student, be a good boy, be a good girl, these things are so deeply embedded within us, we just naturally subordinate to, I should go to university. I should get a job. I should do this. I should do that. I ought to do this. I need to do that. And when you go through that life and like should do, ought to, need to, supposed to, that's when also we are more likely to get into addictive behaviors like food, alcohol, sex, drugs, all of that. Again, because we are suppressing who our true nature is. We are doing these should do's, ought to, supposed to be's, and then we couldn't survive without some instant gratification from some place to neutralize that. It's a perfect and beautiful mechanism, but when you learn that, then you get the extreme ownership, the opportunity to then find a different way. And it might not happen straight away, and you don't even know it to know the path where you need to go to. You just start with what you know and let what you know grow. Because when I was at university, I'm like, I don't know, I definitely don't want to do this. I don't know who I am, I don't know where I want to go, but I definitely don't want to do this. However, teaching martial arts, that's something that really resonates with me right now. So I did that for 4 years. And then after a while, like, okay, cool. Now I outgrown the situation. I need to go into a different spot. Again, that was tough too. And I probably made there's a story behind that too. So I won't tell you that one now, but maybe in the next steps or part 2, we'll talk about that as what actually made me transition. But when I did that, okay, I don't know what I want to do. Well, I still know I like martial arts. I still know I like personal development. So let's look around and see what happens. And when you actually give yourself the opportunity to start with what you know, let what you know grow, it's okay if you go in the completely wrong direction, because an object in motion stays in motion. It keeps going. So if you just say, hey, I need to do a 180 and just go the other way, at least you're in motion. If you are standing still and I need to go this way, I need to go this way, I need to go this way, you're just spinning around. You're just blade. You're just going like this. Like, you're not pointing any direction. You're not going. At least try to go, because even if you go on the wrong journey, even if you, let's say you go on a side quest, you're gonna find some treasures and skills and learnings along the way that you can bring up. The reason why I have to able to have this conversation is because I was a teacher for 4 years. Like I was able to smooth out my accent because I have a very strong Hungarian accent, and that's where I'm from originally. Hence why the name. I was able to smooth out my accent. I was able to apply the teachings I saw people do on stage. I was actually doing that for my students. Therefore, I have the experience and have the skills. And even though that pathway wasn't it, the skills definitely were part of my journey. So it's important to start with what you know and let what you know grow, because then life doesn't become this scary having to know what you need to do for the rest of your life. It becomes an exploration of who you are, which is way more fun. From this fear and horror movie that if you don't know, you are screwed, it goes to this adventure of who you are becoming.
Dude, you just hit like my life's mission in that statement, where I completely agree. It's like, and I had a very similar experience to you, where graduated high school. It was one of those things where everyone in my high school was talking about, like, what college are you going to? What degree did you want to get? Like, what job are you looking to do? I'm like, I don't know, partying and sports. Is that a degree? Like, I'll go for that. And same thing. Like, I was in school, felt like a total fish out of water, just did not mesh at all with it. Again, except for the partying and sports aspect that I fit in perfectly. But it was once I stopped being the person I thought I should be and started being the truest, best version of who I am in the moment, that's when I personally saw that switch of like, oh, this sucks, to like every day is an adventure. And yeah, not every day is amazing, not every day is optimal, but it's an adventure and it's exciting and it's fun and it's liberating. And so if you get nothing else out of what we talked about, do that. Like, figure out, like, what do you actually want? Like, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? What do you want to experience? And once you figure that out, move towards it. Like, take action. Because again, exactly like what you were talking about, even if it's in the wrong direction, you'll learn something, you'll develop a skill, you'll meet a person that'll help you pivot, get back on track, and then keep moving and using that momentum. So
100%.
awesome way to end it.
One last thing I want to add before we go is that if you're going to look up my Instagram, you're going to see me do some crazy stuff like get hit by a car, jump off a 40-foot tower, and stuff like that. That is not the courage to do that, doesn't even compare to the courage it takes to be your authentic self. To be able to say no to the things that being put on by either society, by our upbringings, by conditioning. To be able to actually go through that mental and subconscious conditioning, that takes the biggest amount of courage. No skydiving, no bungee jumping, no bullfighting will ever come close to having the courage to be your authentic self. And that's why not many people do it. But the people that do, and people have been willing to actually go through it, actually have a lot of choices in life for sure. But then again, like, what if I don't do it? Like, what if you do it and fail? But what if you don't do it? You're still gonna live your life. You're still gonna end up and die. So might as well give it a crack.
Oh man, we have to have a second episode. This
For
is
sure.
like, this is so awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all of that amazing content, which it's so obvious that you've put so much time, effort, and intention into studying yourself and personal development as a whole, and honing in on your craft and stepping into your true self, stepping into your authenticity. And I want to acknowledge you for that, because like you said, it is a very scary thing to do, putting your mask down, putting your walls down, and just letting the world see you as you. And just the way that you do it, and I'm sure the amazing example that you're setting for people in your life, that's something I love to see. So I want to acknowledge you for that. I'm so grateful that you're living the life you're living, you're doing the things you're doing, and you were willing to take the time out and give us a little bit and piece of the life that you've lived.
Brother, like I'm so grateful for the fact that you had me on as well, and like obviously give so much value to your customers and clients and whatnot. So, dude, I'm very very grateful we connected and crossed paths, and we definitely need another conversation. This was a lot of fun for me as well.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for round two, man. So for everybody listening, thank you so much. Again, I will continue to say this. I don't know all the answers. That's why I bring other people on. This is not a solo podcast. And I want to thank everyone who's on this journey with me, the people who are devoted to making themselves better, to living life more fully, more passionately. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment box, or you can message us personally. We'll have all of our information in the show notes. And if you know someone who this conversation would help, which is every single person who is living and breathing. Share this with them. That's why there's a share button. So thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.